Part 1. The Castle Librarian's routine in a towering stone castle, nestled between moors and misty hills. Behind heavy wooden doors and beneath the flicker of candlelight, dwells a woman of quiet purpose and deep devotion. She is not a lady of courtly dance, nor a warrior on the battlements. She is the Castle Librarian. Tonight, let us walk in silence beside her. Let us follow her as she tends to the precious written word. In a time when few could read, when parchment was more valuable than gold, she was its humble guardian. This is her story. Chapter 1. Morning in stone and silence, the castle wakes slowly. The clang of the blacksmith's hammer echoes in the lower yard. Kitchen fires crackle to life. Stable boys rush to feed the horses. But up in the high eastern tower, where the light of the rising sun first touches the stone, she stirs quietly from her small cot. Her chamber is modest, a straw mattress, a wooden chest, a basin of cold water. But even here, books lie in tidy stacks, as if they cannot bear to be far from her. She dresses simply, a woolen gown, long sleeves to guard against the draught, and a linen apron tied neatly around her waist. She gathers her hair in a cloth wrap. Ink and vellum do not mix kindly with loose curls. Before she eats, before she speaks to anyone, she climbs the spiral stair to the library. It is her chapel. Chapter 2. The library itself. The castle library is not vast. Not like the ones in great monasteries or cities. But here, among scrolls and tomes, she sees a kind of sacred order. There are perhaps 200 books. A treasure beyond measure. Some are chained to their shelves. Others rest in wooden boxes lined with wool. Many are wrapped in cloth or tied with leather straps. There are books on saints, on healing herbs, on law, on astronomy. Some contain poems from long-dead bards, copied lovingly in fading ink. Others are family records, annals of the castle's lineage, chronicles of distant wars. Each morning, she walks among them like one might tend a garden. She dusts gently, straightens bindings, notes which pages have begun to curl or fade. And always, she breathes deeply, the scent of ink and leather, dust and time. Chapter 3. The duties of a castle librarian. Her work is delicate, quiet, but not without labor. She copies texts by hand, a task of great care. Her quill must be sharp, her ink fresh, her wrist steady. One smudge, one careless blot, and days of work may be lost. She reads aloud to the young squires who come to her after training. She teaches them their letters, guiding their hands as they struggle to write their names. She inventories scrolls brought back from trade caravans. She transcribes letters for the Lord's steward. She translates Latin prayers into the common tongue so the cook may speak them aloud before meals. Sometimes, the priest asks her to examine old parchment found in the chapel. Other times, the healer consults her books on poultices and wounds. Her hands are always busy. Her mind is never still. Chapter 4. Her love for books. There is no place in the castle she loves more. By the tall windows of the library, where light falls in long golden stripes across the floor, she feels peace. Books do not shout. They do not demand or deceive. They ask only that you listen. She runs her fingers across pages like one might touch a friend's face. Each letter, each line, feels alive to her. When she reads, the world beyond the walls fades. She has traveled to Jerusalem through a monk's journal. She has wept at the poetry of a dying prince. She has laughed quietly at the scribbled margin notes left by some forgotten scribe. She loves them all, the noble manuscripts, the flawed copies, the fading fragments. To her, they are voices from the past, waiting patiently to be heard again. Chapter 5. Challenges and hurdles. But her path is not easy. The cold is a constant enemy. Ink thickens. Parchment cracks. Her fingers grow stiff. The castle steward frowns at the cost of vellum and quills. Sometimes, her ink pots are not refilled for weeks. Candles are rationed. And so, in winter, she works by daylight alone. Then there are the pests. Mice gnaw at bindings. Moths flutter too near flame. Once, a careless soldier placed a goblet on an open folio. The stain remains, a blot of carelessness on a century-old page. And though she is respected, she is not always understood. Some call her eccentric. Others say she speaks to books. They laugh, gently, but the wounds are there. She has no title, no great salary, but still, she labors. Because to her, books are not just things. They are keepers of memory. Chapter 6. Restorations and repairs she knows how to mend. With thin glue made from boiled parchment, she smooths tears. With tiny threads, she sews loosened bindings. She presses warped covers under flat stones. Ink is mixed by hand, oak gall and iron salts. The smell is sharp, familiar. She writes with a feather quill, trimmed just so. When a book is beyond repair, she salvages what she can, copying its contents into new folios, preserving the words if not the vessel. Sometimes, she sings as she works. A quiet hum. A tune her mother once sang. No one else sees this part. The quiet resurrection of the past. But the books know. Chapter 7. Her friends and solitude. She is not alone. The castle healer visits often. They trade remedies and old herbal texts. A friendship built over pages and poultices. The cook sends her warm bread wrapped in cloth, a silent thank you for a transcribed recipe. A young stable boy sometimes lingers by her door, too shy to speak. She lends him simple stories, and he returns them, eyes wide with new wonder. Even the old knight, gruff and scarred, once sat beside her and listened as she read aloud from a tale of dragons. He said little, but he returned the next day. Still, most of her hours pass in silence. And she does not mind. Solitude, to her, is not loneliness. It is space to listen, to the rustle of parchment, the whisper of words. Chapter 8. Evening rituals. As the sun sinks behind the hills, she finishes her work. Candles are snuffed, shutters drawn. She wraps the most delicate books in cloth and stores them in their chest. She marks her place in her current copy, a long passage from a Roman philosopher, and sets her quill to rest. Before she leaves, she walks once more among the shelves. She speaks softly, to no one in particular. Rest well, old friends. I'll return with the light. Then, down the winding stairs she goes. Chapter 9. Dreams and devotion. In her small chamber, beneath woolen blankets, she dreams not of courtship or riches. She dreams of ink, of letters dancing across pages, of languages she has not yet read, of libraries that stretch beyond sight. Sometimes she dreams of a future, where books are everywhere. In homes, in schools, in hands of children. A world where stories are shared by all. She does not know if such a time will come. But still, each day, she tends to her quiet garden of words. Because even in a world of swords and silence, she believes in this, that words matter. That knowledge is sacred. That stories must be kept. And so ends a day in the life of the Castle Librarian. A quiet woman with ink-stained fingers, and a heart full of pages. Sleep now, and dream of parchment and candles, of high stone towers and softly turning leaves. Good night, gentle listener. Part 2. Life aboard a trading ship. The sea has a rhythm, like a heart. And for some, that rhythm becomes a calling. Let me tell you the story of a young man named Elias. Born the son of a seasoned merchant, Elias followed the tide and took his place aboard a trading ship in the mid-1500s, a time when spice, silk, and salt could build kingdoms or sink them. His life was not of battles and banners, but of tides and trade winds, salt-stung eyes, and quiet determination. Let us sail with him now, and gently drift into another world. Chapter 1. A son of the docks. Elias was born in a bustling port city, where languages mixed like the sea breeze and the harbors never slept. His father, Thomas, was a merchant, not wealthy, but respected. He owned a modest ship and sailed routes known more for tough bartering than grand adventure. From a young age, Elias watched the crew load crates of wool and return with glass beads, spices, dried fruits, and linen. He admired their sea-worn hands and the easy laughter of men who had seen the world, or at least the watery edges of it. He learned to tie knots before he could write. Learned star charts before scripture. And when his father's first mate took sick before a voyage to Lisbon, Elias, only 17, took his place. He never looked back. Chapter 2. The trading ship. The ship was a cog, a wide, single-mast vessel, broad in the beam and humble in her elegance. Built of oak, she creaked constantly, as though complaining about the endless push and pull of the sea. Her hull had scars, proof of storms weathered and docks survived. There was no comfort aboard. Hammocks swung in damp quarters. The air below deck was a soup of brine, pitch, and sweat. But she carried cargo, and hope. Bales of wool. Casks of salted fish. Barrels of wine from the coast. Iron tools from blacksmiths inland. And she returned with pepper from the Indies, olive oil from the south, and ink-dyed cloth that seemed too fine to be real. Chapter 3. Life at sea. Each day aboard had its rhythm. Elias rose before the sun, roused by bells and the shuffle of boots. The deck would be slick with salt dew. Sails trimmed before the light truly touched the waves. He took his meals with the crew, hardtack, dried beans, perhaps a salted herring or two. Water was rationed, and ale was safer than most. He learned quickly to haul lines, man the tiller, repair torn sailcloth with calloused fingers. There were no days off. No breaks. The sea demanded presence. In calm, they scrubbed the deck, repaired netting, played dice. In rough seas, there was only survival. Chapter 4. The challenge of storms. One night, not long past the Azores, clouds rolled in like a god's cloak. The wind howled like a beast unchained. Waves rose like hills and smashed the deck with fury. Elias lashed himself to the mast, teeth gritted, soaked and freezing. The tiller broke. A sail tore free and whipped like a ghost in the night. For hours, they bailed water and prayed. One man was lost, pulled by the sea in a blink. When morning came, they floated on wreckage and resolve. Cargo lost. Lives shaken. But the ship held. They patched the mast with planks and pressed on. That day, Elias learned that the sea gives, and the sea takes. And sometimes, it does both at once. Chapter 5. Ports and people. Trading was more than goods. It was people. In Lisbon, Elias met fellow sailors from the Ottoman Empire. In Bruges, he listened to Norse traders speak of ice-thick fjords. Every port was a chorus, dialects, deals, drama. The docks were filled with stevedores shouting in 5 tongues. Merchants haggling over saffron and silk. Guards watching with narrowed eyes. Elias learned the art of the bargain. When to nod. When to stay silent. How to charm without lying, and how to know when he was being robbed. He saw trickery and kindness, both in equal measure. He came to understand that trade was a dance, of trust and suspicion, of offers and withdrawals. And in that delicate rhythm, he thrived. Chapter 6. The threat of pirates. But not all who sail are traders. Some take, and take only. Off the Barbary coast, a black sail on the horizon meant death. Corsairs who showed no mercy. They sought gold, goods, and men, for slavery or ransom. When pirates approached, the crew would arm themselves with pikes and crossbows. Boiling pitch was heated in iron pots, just in case. Elias once stood on the deck, hands trembling, heart thundering, as a smaller sloop chased them under moonlight. They escaped, just barely, thanks to the wind and a desperate jibe that nearly capsized them. From then on, he kept a dagger in his boot, just in case the worst came. The sea, after all, was not ruled by law, but by luck. Chapter 7. Friendship and brotherhood. Aboard the ship, there was no privacy. No room for pride. You bathed in a bucket. Slept in a swinging cloth. Took your turn at every task. But from that closeness came a bond, a brotherhood. There was Marek, who could climb the rigging like a spider. Old Tom, who had a story for every star. And Davo, a cook who sang hymns as he boiled sea biscuits. They were rough men, scarred and blunt, but loyal. Elias became one of them, not the merchant's son, not the landboy, but a sailor. When one was ill, all helped. When one despaired, all drank. They had nothing, and everything, in common. Chapter 8. The weight of distance. There were moments of deep stillness. When the wind died and the sails drooped. When days passed without progress. Elias missed his family most then. His mother's hands. His sister's quiet laughter. The warmth of home. He wrote letters he never sent. Spoke to stars like old friends. Distance is measured not in leagues, but in longing. And yet, even in that ache, he found purpose. For every mile was a step forward. Every wave carried not just goods, but hope. He sailed not just for coin, but to build something. A future. A name. Chapter 9. The return after 4 months at sea, the coast of home appeared through mist. The same gulls wheeled overhead. The same bells rang out. But Elias had changed. His hands were rougher. His back straighter. His eyes more knowing. They unloaded the cargo, spices, cloth, strange oils in glass vials. His father met him at the dock. Said nothing at first. Then placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've earned the tide," he said simply. That night, Elias sat at the hearth, warm and full, and listened to the quiet sounds of home. But part of him drifted still. Out there. On the waves. Chapter 10. The traders calling Elias would go again. And again after that. He became a trader not by inheritance, but by choice. He knew the risks, storms, pirates, sickness, shipwreck. But he also knew the rewards, the peace of a steady wind, the joy of a fair deal, the wonder of distant shores. To trade was to connect. One village to another. One world to the next. And in doing so, Elias helped build bridges, not of stone or timber, but of trust. So ends the day in the life of a young sea trader. One of thousands who risked all, so spices could season stews. So ink could flow. So letters could be sealed in wax. Rest now. Dream of wide blue oceans. Of creaking ships. Of far-off ports and the brave, quiet souls who sailed between them. Good night, traveler. Part 3. The Clockmaker of Elderglen. In a small, cobbled town nestled between misty hills and slow rivers, there lived a man whose days were ruled by gears, springs, and silence. His name was Alaric. He was a clockmaker, a humble profession in a time when most still read the hours by sun and shadow. A man of patience, of precision, and of quiet wonder. Let us step into his world. The world of brass wheels and winding keys, of candlelit workbenches and ticking hearts encased in oak and iron. Let us spend a day in the life of a medieval clockmaker. Chapter 1. The Morning Bell. Alaric rose before the sun. Not because he had to, but because he wished to. For the early hours were his, sacred and silent. His modest home above the workshop smelled of beeswax, metal shavings, and ink. He dressed in thick wool and pulled a leather apron over his chest, worn from years of use. Below, the shop awaited him, shelves lined with timepieces in various states of assembly. Wheels no bigger than a beetle's shell, springs coiled tight as secrets. He lit a single candle and wound the large workshop clock, his first creation. Its slow tick welcomed the day. And so began another cycle. Chapter 2. The Clockmaker's Passion. Alaric was not always a craftsman. His father was a cooper, a barrel-maker, and expected the same path for his son. But young Alaric had always been different. He asked questions not about wine or grain, but about motion and time. Why does the sun move as it does? Why do the stars shift each season? When he was 10, a traveling merchant passed through Elderglen, selling trinkets and curiosities. Among them, a small, broken timepiece from Flanders. Alaric bought it with his year's savings and spent weeks peering into its secrets. When he finally made it tick again, he wept. From that day forward, time was no longer a mystery, it was his life's pursuit. Chapter 3. The Workshop. The heart of Alaric's world was his bench, worn smooth, stained with oil and ink. Tiny tools hung in neat rows. Files of all sizes, tweezers, hammers with heads no bigger than a fingernail. A magnifying lens carved from polished glass sat mounted on an arm. He worked mostly alone, save for his apprentice, Matthew, a quiet lad of 13 who showed promise. The boy swept the floors, polished brass, and watched. Much of Alaric's work was spent not in action, but in stillness, watching a spring's tension, testing a guy's placement, listening for a whisper too fast or too slow. A single misaligned tooth could silence an entire machine. Chapter 4. materials and the search for perfection. Clockmaking was not simply a trade, it was a hunt. Brass came from far-off cities. Alaric bartered for it with finished clocks or rare herbs he gathered in the woods. Steel springs were rarer still, often brought in by merchants who knew of his need. He used oiled leather from the tanner to line housings. Carved hardwoods from the foresters for casing. Tiny rubies, sometimes, for bearings, smuggled from across the mountains. And glass, precious, shimmering glass, for dials. The best came from Venice, traded like treasure. He knew each material's story. Each weight, feel, and flaw. Nothing was wasted. Everything had a purpose. This made his work slow. But it also made it timeless. Chapter 5. Struggles and Stubbornness. The town did not always understand. Why build clocks when you could see the sun? Why spend weeks on one machine when others made 10 carts in the same time? Alaric was often paid little. Some years were lean. There were days when he went without meat, days when he sold his coat to buy a single gear. But never did he waver. To him, each tick was a prayer. Each working clock a kind of miracle. His hands bore the marks, thin cuts, burns, calluses. His eyes grew weaker. But still, he worked. For Alaric, time itself was sacred. And he, its humble servant. Chapter 6. Those he served. Though the nobility cared little for clocks, some found their way to Alaric's shop. A minor lord once commissioned a grand timepiece with a face of polished walnut, inlaid with gold. It took Alaric 2 years. When it was done, the noble remarked, "It ticks well, for such a small thing." He paid poorly. Alaric said nothing. But that clock would ring on the hour for 80 years. His true patrons were townsfolk, a baker who needed a timer for his oven, a monk who wanted bells to chime for prayer. He charged them little, often nothing, and in return, they brought him bread, candles, a warm scarf in winter. They did not understand his work, but they understood him. Chapter 7. Restoration and Memory. Alaric did not only build, he repaired. A shattered sundial from the abbey. A rusted timepiece passed down generations. A bell mechanism frozen by years of neglect. He approached each with reverence. Not for coin, but for history. Restoring a clock was like mending a story. You heard it tick again and felt the weight of years it had counted. One day, a widow brought him her late husband's broken pocket watch. "It stopped when he passed," she said, eyes wet. Alaric worked for a week, polishing and coaxing. When it ticked once more, he placed it in her hands gently. "It remembers," he whispered. Chapter 8. The Festival Bell. Every spring, Elder Glen held a festival. This year, the town elders asked Alaric to restore the old bell tower, silent for decades. The mechanism had rusted, its weights jammed, its gears broken. He accepted, knowing it would take months. Matthew helped. Day after day, they climbed the tower, hauling tools and oil, cleaning ancient cogs. Alaric replaced the weights, carved new gears by hand. He polished every tooth, rewound every spring. On the festival eve, he stood by the pull rope. The crowd watched, expectant. He nodded to Matthew. The boy pulled. The bell rang, deep and perfect. Cheers echoed through the town. Alaric smiled, but said little. For him, the sound was enough. Chapter 9. Legacy and Humility. Alaric was not famous. His name would not be written in great books. But his clocks would tick on. In halls and chapels, kitchens and towers. Each tick a testament to patience. To care. He trained Matthew not just in craft, but in character. The clock does not lie, he'd say. It tells only what is. His work was slow. His rewards were few. But each night, as he wound his final timepiece, he felt content. Not for glory, but for rhythm. He did not master time. He listened to it. So sleep now, as Alaric once did, to the soft ticking of clocks in a quiet shop, where time flows not as a river, but as a whisper, and where one humble man made each moment count. Good night. Listener.